welcome to our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're diving into Between the World and Me
Great book.
by Ta-Nehisi Coates.
It's a powerful one.
Now, this one, it's not your typical book.
Right.
It's not like chapters in a plot.
No.
It's actually a letter
Yeah.
from Coates to his son.
Mm-hmm.
It's grappling with what it means
Mm.
to grow up black in America.
Absolutely.
And it gets pretty intense.
Yeah.
It explores things like systemic racism and this idea
Yeah.
of the black body being vulnerable
Yeah.
in a society that often seems to exploit it.
For sure. For sure.
It really makes you question
It does.
what the American dream
Right.
really means for different people.
It's a deeply personal story.
Right.
But it speaks to such universal themes. He challenges a lot of the narratives
Right.
we're often told about race and equality.
Yeah, one of the most striking things for me
Mm-hmm.
was this idea he calls the inviolable black body.
Right.
It's like throughout history, there's
Yeah.
been this attempt to
Right.
control and exploit black bodies.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just about individual prejudice.
Yeah. No.
It's about a whole system.
It's systemic. Absolutely.
Exactly.
It connects it to things like slavery, obviously,
Right.
where black bodies were literally treated as property,
Yeah.
and even to modern policing.
Yeah.
Like, these issues are
Well.
deeply rooted in our history,
Wow.
and they continue to affect people's lives today.
It's almost like he's saying,
Right.
look, you can't just ignore this history.
Yeah.
It's still shaping the world we live in. And it made me think about how these systems impact people
For sure.
in ways I might not even realize.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think
Does this idea challenge how you've thought about race and equality?
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that really struck me was how Coates critiques this idea of the American dream, the whole concept of opportunity and upward mobility.
Uh-huh.
He argues that for many Black Americans,
Right.
that dream is built on a very shaky foundation.
It's like he's saying there's this willful ignorance
Yes.
about how this country's prosperity was built,
Mm-hmm.
and how that past still affects people's chances
Right.
of achieving
Uh-huh.
that so-called dream.
It raises some tough questions for all of us.
For sure.
Like, what does it mean if this American dream
Yeah.
is based on a history of injustice?
Right.
How does that change our understanding of
Yeah.
what it means to be American?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
definitely a lot to unpack.
For sure.
Now, get this.
Okay.
Coates argues that racism
Mm-hmm.
actually predates
Yes.
the whole concept of race itself.
I know, right?
I know, right?
Sounds crazy at first.
It sounds crazy.
But it's a fascinating argument.
So unpack that a little bit for us.
He's saying that the belief in different races
Okay.
was actually created
Uh-huh.
to justify systems of oppression.
Okay.
It wasn't about inherent differences,
Gotcha.
but about establishing power.
So race was used as a tool
Exactly.
to create a hierarchy,
Yes.
not a reflection of actual differences.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where things start to get really interesting when we think about what we can actually do
Yeah.
to dismantle these systems that are still in place.
Right.
Coates doesn't just leave us
Right.
with a bleak diagnosis.
Okay.
He actually offers some concrete steps
All right.
for how we can fight for a more just world.
Okay, now I'm all ears.
Okay.
Give me some of those actionable steps.
Right.
What can people do?
Well, he emphasizes systemic reform,
Okay.
advocating for change
Yeah.
within institutions.
Yeah.
Like education,
Right.
housing, and law enforcement.
Right.
It's not just about individual acts of prejudice.
Right.
It's about addressing the underlying structures
Yeah.
that create inequality.
So it's not enough to just be nice to people.
Right.
You have to change the systems, right?
You have to change the system.
Yeah.
He also talks about the importance of personal awareness,
Okay.
educating ourselves,
Yeah.
seeking out diverse perspectives,
Yeah.
really developing our
Yeah.
critical thinking skills
Okay.
so we can analyze how power dynamics work.
It's like doing the work to understand
Yes.
how we might be complicit in these systems,
Yes.
even without realizing
It's
it.
out realizing it.
I think that's a crucial point
Yeah.
for people to grasp.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he highlights the power of community and culture.
Okay.
Coates talks about his own experience
Uh-huh.
at Howard University,
Yeah.
which he refers to as the Mecca.
I remember that part.
It was this transformative place for him
Yeah.
where he found a sense of belonging
Yeah.
and connected with a rich history and culture.
It felt so powerful
Yeah.
when I read it.
It speaks to the importance of creating
Yeah.
spaces
Yeah.
where marginalized communities can feel empowered and celebrate their identities,
Right.
spaces that challenge the dominant narratives
Right.
and offer a different perspective.
Okay, so bringing this back to our listener,
Okay.
how can we actually apply these ideas
Yeah.
to our own lives?
Right.
What can people do right now after listening to this?
Well, we can start by challenging
Yeah.
those myths and biases we encounter in our everyday lives.
Like at work or even in our social circle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you see something that just doesn't feel right, you know,
If you see something, say something.
speak up
Yeah.
or push for more inclusive hiring practices where you work.
Exactly.
You know, we can also make an effort
Yeah.
to create more inclusive spaces in our own environments.
Right.
Being mindful of the language we use, actively seeking out diverse perspectives,
Yeah.
and just being open to having those tough conversations
Yeah.
about race and equality.
It's like creating a space
Yeah,
where everyone feels safe and respected,
exactly.
regardless of their background.
Regardless of their background, and we can advocate for change
Yes.
within our own spheres of influence,
Right.
whether that's supporting organizations, fighting for social justice,
Yeah.
voting for policies that promote equity,
Right.
or even just having those difficult conversations
Yeah.
with friends and family
Yeah.
who might not be aware of these issues.
You know, it's amazing how Coates manages to take these complex ideas
Right?
and give you concrete things you can do.
He does.
Of like, okay, I can actually do something about this.
Every action,
Yeah.
no matter how small,
Oh.
can contribute to dismantling these systems.
He really drives home the point
Yeah.
that we all have a role to play
Yes.
in creating a more just and equitable world. Now, before we move on,
Okay.
I want to touch on that idea of the Mecca again.
Okay.
Coates' experience at Howard University
Yeah.
seemed so impactful for him.
It was.
Can you talk a bit more about why these kinds of spaces
Sure.
are so important,
Okay.
especially for marginalized communities?
It's about finding a place
Yeah.
where you feel seen,
Right.
heard, and
Right.
understood. For
Yeah.
Coates, Howard University provided that space.
It was a safe space for him.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a place where he could explore his Black identity
Mhm.
in a way he hadn't been able to before.
It's like finding your tribe, you know,
It is.
people who get where you're coming from
Mhm.
and support you.
Yeah. And those spaces offer a counter-narrative
Right.
to the dominant narratives
Right.
that often portray
Yeah.
marginalized communities in a negative light.
Right. They provide a space
They do.
for healing growth
Yes.
and empowerment.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about celebrating culture.
Right.
It's also about healing from the wounds
Mm-hmm.
inflicted by these systems of oppression.
Exactly. It's a reminder that
And-
there's strength and beauty
Yeah.
in these communities,
Ah.
despite the challenges they face.
For sure.
And that connects back to the idea of actionable steps.
Right.
You know, we can support
Yeah.
historically Black institutions like Howard,
Uh-huh.
or even create similar spaces within our own communities.
I love that idea.
You know?
We can all be part of creating those meccas
Right.
for people who need them.
For people who need them. Exactly.
Right.
It's about recognizing the power of representation
Yeah.
and creating environments
Right.
where everyone feels valued
Right.
and respected.
Okay, I have to ask,
Sure.
what are some of the meccas in your own life?
Hmm.
What spaces or communities
Yeah.
have helped you
Yeah.
feel seen and empowered?
Well, for me, it's been those small, intimate gatherings where
Right.
I can connect with people who share similar passions.
Right.
Sometimes it's a book club
Okay.
or a volunteer group.
Yeah.
For me, it's less about the where
Yeah.
and more about that feeling
I get
of a shared purpose.
those little pockets of connection
Exactly.
can be so powerful.
Yeah.
And they can take so many forms, right?
They can?
Like for some people, it might be a physical space,
Right.
like their church.
Uh-huh.
Well, for others, it's an online community.
Yeah.
It's finding where you truly belong.
Exactly. And speaking of places that shape us,
Yeah.
Coates doesn't hold back
Yeah.
when it comes to his critique of education.
He's not afraid to call it like he sees it.
He's pretty tough on traditional schools.
Yeah. He's definitely not a fan of just
Sure.
memorizing facts and following the rules.
He argues that, especially for Black students,
Uh-huh.
the system often prioritizes obedience and conformity
Right.
over things like critical thinking or
Wow.
genuine curiosity.
It's like instead of encouraging kids to question the world around them, they're just told to sit still and accept what they're taught.
Mm-hmm.
He even compares school to a kind of dream
Yeah.
that people buy into.
Yeah.
But it's not a dream that benefits everyone equally.
Right. And that ties back to his whole point about
Yeah.
challenging those dominant narratives.
Right.
Don't just accept what you're told.
Right.
Dig deeper. Look for different perspectives.
So for someone listening, maybe this means checking out books and podcasts
Yes.
they wouldn't normally choose.
Exactly.
Or having those conversations
Yeah.
that make you think differently,
Right.
even if they're a bit uncomfortable.
It's about taking charge of your own learning journey.
Right.
Don't just be a passive recipient of information.
Right.
Go out and make those connections yourself.
And that's a skill that's useful
Yeah.
way beyond the classroom, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Being able to think for yourself
Yes.
and question what you see happening around you.
Absolutely. Now, another area where Coates calls for serious action is policing and policy.
Right.
He's incredibly outspoken
Yeah.
about police brutality
Uh-huh.
and the systemic racism baked into it.
It's not just about individual bad cops, right?
No, it goes much deeper.
He connects it all the way back
He does.
to slavery and the Jim Crow era.
He sees the current system
Right.
as a continuation of that same history
Wow.
of control and oppression.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the patterns.
So what are some practical steps people can take, in their daily lives
Yeah.
to challenge this?
Supporting organizations fighting for police reform is a big one.
Okay.
There are groups out there
Right.
working to change laws,
Uh-huh.
promote accountability,
Right.
and bring more transparency
Okay.
to how things operate.
Yeah.
You can also advocate for
Yeah.
policies that directly address these issues.
And that could even be as simple as talking to your friends and family
Exactly.
about these issues, right?
Yeah.
Raising awareness and making sure it's not just brushed under the rug.
Every conversation matters.
Right.
It's about using whatever platform you have,
Right.
no matter how big or small,
Yeah.
to push for change.
Now, it's important to acknowledge
Yes.
that Between the World and Me has its critics too, right?
That's right.
Not everyone agrees
Not everyone.
with everything Coates says.
Some people feel like his focus on the Black experience excludes other marginalized groups.
And some argue that his emphasis on systemic racism
Yes.
can make people feel hopeless,
Yeah.
like nothing can ever change.
But I think it's crucial to remember
Yeah.
that Coates is writing from his own unique perspective and lived
Yeah.
experience.
Right.
He's not claiming to have all the answers.
He's just telling his story.
Right.
Yeah, his goal isn't to be the definitive voice on everything.
Right.
It's more about starting a dialogue,
Exactly.
getting people talking about these issues
Yes.
that are often ignored.
That are often ignored. And that's what makes this book so powerful.
Right.
Even years after it was published,
Uh-huh.
it sparks a debate.
Right.
It makes you think critically.
Yeah.
And it challenges you
For sure.
to examine your own assumptions.
It's definitely not a light read.
No, it's not.
It's a book that stays with you.
And ultimately, I believe it leaves us with a sense of hope.
Okay.
Not a naive hope,
Uh-huh.
but a hope grounded in the belief that change is possible
Right.
if we're willing to put in the work.
And that's a great place to transition
Okay.
because in our final part, we're going to explore
Yes.
one of the most personal aspects of this book.
Right.
Coates' relationship with his son.
Uh-huh.
We'll look at the lessons he tries to impart
Okay.
and how love, fear,
Mm-hmm.
and resilience play into navigating a world that can be hostile, especially for Black bodies. Welcome back to our deep dive into Ta-Nehisi Coates,
Mhm.
Between the World and Me. We're in the final stretch now, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this last part. We've talked about systems and history, but now we're getting to the heart of this book, Coates' relationship with his son.
Yeah, this is where that letter format becomes so powerful.
Right.
It's like we're eavesdropping on this incredibly intimate conversation.
Yeah.
You can really feel the weight of his words
Yeah.
as he tries to prepare his son for what it means to be Black in America.
Yeah, it's so raw and honest. He's not sugarcoating anything.
No.
He talks about his fears, his hopes, and just the immense love he has for his son.
Right.
It's really moving.
And it goes beyond just fatherly advice, you know? It's like
Right.
he's grappling with this legacy of trauma and resilience that's been passed down through generations of Black families.
He doesn't shy away from the harsh realities his son will face, the vulnerability, that constant threat of violence, the feeling of being judged and underestimated because of the color of his skin. It's heavy stuff.
It is, but amidst all that, he also instills in him a sense of pride,
Yeah.
connection to this rich history and culture that can't be erased.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the importance of self-discovery. finding your own path and defining your own identity despite those external pressures.
It's a message that resonates so deeply, even if you're not Black or a parent.
Yeah.
It's about that universal human need to belong, to find your purpose, and to have the freedom to be your true self.
Absolutely. One of the things that stuck with me was
Yeah?
how Coates talks about fear. He describes it as a constant companion for Black people in America, something that shapes their every interaction and decision.
He even calls it a low-grade hum, always in the background,
Yes.
a constant reminder of the potential for violence and injustice.
And that fear isn't just individual, it's collective.
Right.
It's rooted in the shared experiences of generations who have faced oppression and discrimination.
It makes you realize how much this fear impacts people's lives
It does.
in ways we might not even consider. But Coates doesn't just leave us wallowing in that fear. He challenges his son, and really all of us, to confront it head on.
To confront it, yeah. It's about finding ways to live with courage and resilience, to not let that fear control your choices or define who you are.
Now, amidst all this heaviness, there's also this incredibly strong sense of love that runs through the entire book.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Coates' love for his son just jumps off the page. It's in every word he writes.
And it's not a naive or sentimental love.
No.
It's fierce and protective. A love that recognizes the challenges his son will face and tries to equip him with the tools to navigate them.
It's a love rooted in understanding empathy and this shared commitment to fighting for a better world. And that's what makes this book so powerful, I think.
That love is what gives it its hope, because it reminds us that even in the face of adversity, love can be a source of strength, of resilience, and of real change.
Well said. I think that's a beautiful way to sum it up.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Between the World and Me, I want to leave our listener with this final thought-provoking question from Coates himself. If racism is a construct, how can we deconstruct it?
It's a question that requires some serious introspection, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge our own biases.
It's a call to action for all of us, to examine those systems and structures that perpetuate inequality and find ways to dismantle them.
And it reminds us that the fight for justice is ongoing. It takes constant vigilance, courage, and a commitment to creating a world where everyone can live with dignity and freedom.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked some new insights and inspired you to continue exploring these critical issues.
And we encourage you to seek out Between the World and Me for yourself and to engage in these conversations within your own communities. Because only through open dialogue and collective action can we hope to create real and lasting change.